Welcome back to another episode of the Man in Progress podcast. Sitting with me is one of my dearest friends, somebody I know really well, and I'm excited to have here Dr. Jason Wright. Thank you for coming on the show.
Well, thank you so much for having me, man. It's a real honor to be here. Obviously, like you said, I consider you a really close friend. And when you announced this podcast, I was like, yes, this is so, this is so needed. And like, what better person to put it out there? So just the fact that I'm even here, talking with you about this stuff is like it's surreal, and I appreciate the opportunity.
I'm really pumped to have you, and we've joked that and more serious than joking that you need to do something similar to this as well, because we've bonded over this stuff. For context, Jason and I are both physical therapists. We actually met in a physical therapy business coaching program. That's how we first got introduced to one another. It's been so cool to watch each other over the last few years grow. Jason, for anyone who's out there, they heard the intro, got to hear kind of the things you're doing, but what are you focusing on day to day right now for people who don't know you? Let's start out with one, how old are you? And then two, kind of what are you doing for your energy, work, like what you're putting your time into at the moment?
Well, I am 35 years old, and I'm originally from Kentucky, and kind of grew up there, spent my whole life there, and just recently moved to Tampa, Florida, near the end of 2019. And I've been here for, 8 months, 7 months now. So it's, that's kind of where things have been more recently. Day to day, to give some context on where we're at right now in the scheme of current events, I'm hunkered down in my apartment.
It's coronavirus
have
season.
no job to go to. I have nothing yet because I can't. Yeah, coronavirus. So I'm at home just trying to continue to put effort into my own personal development, making sure that my routine is as normalized as possible for my own well-being and my own productivity through my business, which I'm focusing on trying to make sure that 80% of what I was doing online to sustain my business can become 100% right now. So just a lot of effort on myself and my business. And I've learned those two things are so interrelated that I shouldn't even designate them as separate entities.
Yeah, we're both huge fans of personal development and growing our businesses, mainly. I mean, I know for me, and I think for you, for to create more opportunities for time in our life and what we want to do. And I always start the question now with, how old are you? Because I've been throwing this by the people I've interviewed so far on the show of, I've spent a lot of probably the last decade since 25-ish, and I'm 33 now, and we're close to the same age of, I have these really stark periods where I will sit and focus on my age and like the number and where I should be and expectations of myself. And I've been super curious to ask guests, like, does that ever weigh on your mind as a man? Do you ever stop and think like, where should I be? Do you judge yourself for it? Do you ever stop and like give yourself credit? I've just been thinking a lot about how the time, the number, these social expectations of me, like thinking where should I be, has played on me. And I've been really curious to ask other people, does that ever weigh on you? Or is it something that has weighed on you in the past, or do you not even think about it?
It definitely has in the past. I think something switched in the last year and a half, perhaps, to where I stopped kicking myself in the ass for not being where I thought I should be at this point as a man.
Hmm.
Um, I think it really hit me once I was around 23 or 24 that, by this point I was seeing friends getting married, friends were having kids, people were starting this super successful career right out of school and from undergrad. And I'm sitting here like, I don't even know what I want to do today. So does that make me way behind? Like, am I not the person I'm supposed to be? Am I less of a man because I don't have all those things? And I don't own a home. I don't have a wife. I don't have a child. Like, what's wrong with me? because I was so caught up with comparing myself to societal norms, to other people's standards, and playing the comparison game. And it messed me up big time. And now, like, now it's so freeing because I forget that I'm 35. Like, so somebody asked me earlier today, she was like, how old are you? And I was like, okay, yeah, I'm 35. Because inside I'm still 13.
Yeah. we're it's something that's just been really interesting to me. And I think one thing I really want to dive into is you totally picked up your life and pretty much moved in the last well, really in the last year in terms of both mindset and physically relocating. And I think there's a thing where I think there are a lot of men in particular who are maybe living lives that are not satisfied with, not happy, maybe feeling complacent. And there's this giant fear to uproot and leave comfort and leave safety. But before we get into that, because I actually I didn't even think about it before we hopped on today, and I was like, oh my gosh, how did I not think about asking you about that? Because that's a huge thing at mid-30s. Like, I'm going to go to a whole new place, try something totally new. But before we get there and why that's important, you also were in Bowling Green, Kentucky for most of your life. How long were you in Bowling Green, and how much of your life was rooted in Bowling Green up until you decided to move to Tampa? When did you move again? 8 months ago?
September. Yeah. September 4th or 5th.
Wow. We'll just say 6 months for your context. Okay. So up to 6 months ago, how much of your life was rooted in Kentucky, in the Bowling Green area? And like, how much of your life had been built in that one place?
Yeah. 100% of my life had been built in Kentucky. And 33 of those 34 years were in Bowling Green, Kentucky. So yeah, pretty significant.
Okay, so you grew up in Bowling Green, in the Bowling Green area, 33 out of 34 years. Like, for context, that's pretty much an entire lifetime that you've been alive was there. And you made a decision to leave at 34, which I think is super cool. And I think, as someone who's lived in a lot of different places myself, and I've seen a lot of friends who have never left where they live. And I think a lot of it is fear of leaving what's comfortable, fear of leaving the safety net, which is totally understandable. But you broke out of that, and I'm just really curious. Can you take us through what led you to making that decision? Because I think for a lot of people, it's like, if I were going to do it, it would have been my 20s, and now there's no reason. I don't know anyone there. We could have made it. All these excuses that can go through our mind, but you still decided to go for it. Can you just walk us through, like, what was going through your mind? What allowed you to actually pull the trigger to uproot and leave?
Yeah, I'm not going to say that it wasn't scary, because it was. It was really exciting when I'd first made up my mind. And then as the weeks flew by, the more I was like, oh, am I doing the right thing?
Yeah.
Is this what I'm supposed to be doing?
Yeah.
And something about Tampa is that fortunately my younger brother, he's your age. He and his wife have lived here for 5 years now. Over Memorial Day weekend, when I came down here for our business conference that we were both at, and I think that's when really, like, the depth of these conversations that we've been having, that's where it started. That's where we got below the surface level bullshit, so to speak. Yeah. And it was heading into that weekend where I thought, I've always felt a pull every time I've come down here, but I think I'm going to do it. I think I'm going to pull the trigger, because I no longer had anything really holding me back in Kentucky. In fact, the only things that were holding me back were literally holding me back. Like, so I like to use fun fact about me, I was a huge Apollo series nerd of the NASA missions.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Like, as a kid, like, Apollo 13, like, piqued my interest in a way that I was like, this life is fascinating. Like, what made them think they could go to space and then go to the moon? So So fun fact about the Saturn V rocket is that there, in order to get to space, like there are different, uh, series of events that have to happen. There are different boosters that have to get you to a certain point, and then they have to be cast aside in order
Okay.
for the next series of boosters to take you further into the atmosphere and
It's
into
not just like
orbit.
one giant stream of like fire. You got to do,
No.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so the initial booster serves its purpose. It burns up out of fuel, and then it has to be cast aside. Otherwise it's dead weight.
Hmm.
And that's essentially how I saw where my series of events of my life had taken me.
Hmm.
There's so much that forms us and supports us and provides comfort and safety and coping mechanisms in a way that can help us survive what we go through, survive that initial launch from the ground, from birth. And at some point, not all of us, but many of us do make the decision that we are only going so far carrying that burden on our backs.
Hmm.
We're only going to go so far carrying that dead weight behind us, to where eventually we're going to have to wake up to the fact that it's only holding us back. It's not helping jettison us forward,
Yeah.
and launch us forward. So I made a really tough decision. And this whole process started in your original question. This whole process started when I want to think it was, I've been a PT for about 8 months, and I was looking for a different way, and kind of how we met with like Greg Todd's Smart Success program. That's what started module 1, personal development. And so I started looking into a lot of these personal development things, and I struggled with, I didn't even know where I was weak, because it was like, find areas where you're weak and focus on how to turn those into more maybe strengths or less of a weakness than what they're at. What do you feel like you need the most of? And I didn't know, right? I didn't know what I needed more of. I just knew I needed something. And that was just like an identity crisis,
Yeah.
because it made me, it awoke me to the fact that I don't know myself.
Hmm.
And that was scary, because there I was, 31, 32 years old. I didn't know who I was.
Hmm.
I knew who I thought I wanted to be, and kind of going back to the whole age and what's the natural series of events, where am I supposed to be at this point? I was in a long-term relationship. I was engaged, right? Like we were together 10 years.
Yeah.
And really the whole reason that went awry is because I never knew myself to begin with. And so it came down to, here's this person, here's this thing, it's giving me attention. So I'm going to cater who I am to what gets me more attention. And that's only sustainable for so long.
Yeah.
And many of us make that same mistake. And don't just make it once, we make it over and over. And some of us never wake up and just lead a life of misery. And not to say that necessarily that person was a bad person, that relationship was a terrible relationship, but it gets to the point where if you're miserable with what you're battling with internally, that forces you to either say, this is what it is, or I need to make a change. And so that change started with me, like it had to. But what that does is that dredges up a lot of crap. There's a lot of uncomfortable feelings. There's a lot of uncomfortable thoughts that take place of, I don't know if I want to deal with this right now. And so you try to stuff it down and like put it away for later, sweep it under the rug. But a lot of times, like if you sweep it enough stuff under the rug, you're going to trip over that mountain that you got in the middle of the living room. And I was tripping, I was tripping over that stuff. And so like the transition that took place after ending that relationship in a really traumatic way, in a really unhealthy way, that wasn't fair to myself or to her or anybody else that was involved. That there was an initial month kind of like shock period of like, whoa, my whole life is turned upside down.
Mm.
Like I'm now living with my mom in my 30s. I like my job, my career is in upheaval. My brand new, barely formed business may suffer from this. You
Right.
know, like how am I going to do this? What's my identity? And I was so caught up in what I thought everyone else was seeing that I never stopped to really pay attention to how am I feeling? Like how am I doing right now?
Yeah.
How do I check in with myself? Why am I feeling so distraught? Why am I feeling so lost right now? And and yeah, the initial instinct of why that relationship ended and so many of the ones before that was it got to a certain point. I felt like I'd hit a dead end of like, I can't do this anymore. And so I looked for a way to run away.
Mm. Mm.
And there's so many of us that do that as men of, I'm going to commit to this for as long as I feel like I'm able to be committed to this. And then when I feel no longer being able to stand the test of time and ride the waves and deal with the bullshit that it's going to take to get through this or get out of it, then I'm going to find a way to run away.
Mm.
And so that's what I did. Like I ran away, but I knew I had to. In that situation, I knew I had to.
Yeah.
It wasn't serving either one of us to keep going forward. And so I had to get out of it. And I got out of it in a horrible way. Like cheating is despicable. And by no means or circumstances have I ever condoned it. I witnessed it in my own upbringing. And it always made me sick to think somebody could do that. But it's like, dude, I can see how somebody gets to that point because I got there.
Yeah.
I was so lost and frustrated to where I didn't even know who I was anymore. And so I wasn't myself. I wasn't behaving in ways that were myself. I
Yeah.
was just operating under this guise of who am I supposed to be? And how do I continue to maintain that facade? And that plunged me, that whole processing of that initial few months afterwards of, all right, so I need to get help. Like I can't do this on my own. In fact, I feel further spiraled. Like it got to the point where I was driving to work one morning and I thought, what if I just take this car off the road?
Yeah.
I'm so low right now. Like everybody already thinks I'm despicable. Let's just go ahead and end it.
Yeah.
I mean, I never thought I would ever think that way.
Yeah. It's been interesting. We've done a handful of interviews and so far for the show, and um, including myself, you are now at least the third out of maybe 5 or 6 who have had similar thoughts and who have reached there. And I think that's the crazy thing is we feel like we would never get there, or it's crazy or weird that it would happen. But I'm realizing there's so many of us who are, uh, if not aware of it, moving ourselves towards feelings like that because we aren't for a variety of reasons. And I wanted to ask you, because there's so much in there that I would love to follow up on. But the first thing I would love to just pick your brain on. I know for me to change, I had to hit sort of and I think rock bottom's can be taken in many different ways, in a really low point. And I guess I'm really curious, do you think that, is there a way to, would you have even been open-minded if someone had introduced personal development before you were at that point? I guess I'm just trying to think of, and I think of so many men that I see on the path and I'm like, man, if I could catch you now. But I also know that probably no one was didn't matter how much personal development you put in front of me when I was in that place of just, fine, man, fine, whatever. Like that's, no, like weak people need that. I don't need that. And it took to get to a certain place. I guess I'm just curious, do you feel like, could someone have even talked to you during that phase, or would you have just blown them off?
I've often thought about that.
Yeah.
Do do I think that I honestly would have gone through the transformation that I had to go through to get past that phase of my life to this new phase where I feel much more aligned with my purpose and much more content with who I am and and how I react with others, or interact with others. I don't want to say I think reaction is always a negative term instead of responding. But yeah, so I don't think I would. I think I would have brushed off like, that sounds really good, like good for you. And I support you doing that, but that's weak. And I'm too strong for that. And I don't need that, because therapy's never worked for me before. Help has never worked. Counseling has never worked for me before.
Yeah.
And it never worked before because I never did the work.
Yeah. Yeah. I just am super curious, because I obviously will never know, but I think it's one of those things that it's really interesting how many of us have to end up in a place of really discomfort in order to change and feel that pressure. And I was kind of curious, you're talking about not feeling, this sensation of spiraling and feeling stuck and alone. And I don't know if this is a deep question, but do you feel like you knew how to love yourself when you were a kid or growing up?
Oh man, I had no idea what that entailed. I didn't even know what it meant. It honestly, here's the crazy thing. I think that I only really started to grasp at the outer rim of what that looked like a year ago this time.
So
Because I was going through another.
sometime your 34th year of life. Yeah.
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 Because I was going through a different set of emotional trauma at that point. Like I was getting out of another unhealthy relationship to where my therapist like legitimately quoted it as being an emotionally abusive relationship. Like gaslight, like I was gaslit everything. Like I thought I was the problem.
Yeah.
And like I went deep into just intensive therapy. And dude, it like, wow. That's where it started to open my mind and my heart to the possibilities of, I don't know what I'm worth. I don't know what value I bring to the world and to other people and could bring to a loving, healthy relationship until I hit that point where I was forced to look at it in the face or keep dealing with the bullshit. And I was tired. Like I was tired. I think it took 34 years to get tired of it. And now it's like, I'm so aware to what love can be now and how to love myself. And knowing that that's a fluid thing, that's dynamic and it's always evolving. But knowing that, dude, you can never hope to find any kind of love with somebody else until you start loving yourself and seeing yourself as someone of value.
Yeah.
And only then can you establish the boundaries that are healthy enough to enter into any kind of loving relationship with a partner, with a friend, with anyone.
I think it's so cool to just open up and hear somebody talk about it, because I think there's this real sense of, I should have had it figured out by now, or I should be at a certain place. And you hear people on the surface, someone's going to see a picture of you, Jason. I know you don't like compliments as much as I can't handle compliments, but you are a tall, strong, strapping guy, man. Like on paper, on a resume, if we were to look at it, you have a doctorate degree, you have your own business, you've worked in different places, you're a personal trainer, you're fit. And we would look and go, man, what I would give to be that guy. And yet you just don't know what's in that person's brain and what they're feeling about themselves. And it's just, my hope is that with this podcast, there are other guys out there who are dealing with it and just can see that they're not alone. I want to go off of that question or go off of your answer and ask, I've just been thinking, we've talked about, you and I separately have talked a lot about our childhood and about our environment growing up and how that's played a role in how we think and in our internal dialogue in our stories. And I guess, I've thought a lot about this in my own life now, and I'd love to ask you, for your experience, do you feel like you grew up in an environment where you even were surrounded by people who knew how to love themselves? And did that play a role in your ability to know how to or not know how to give yourself love?
Wow. Man, you hit the nail on the head,
Mm.
because I think that how we first learn anything about the world and anything about relationships and anything that we learn about good versus bad versus, anything else along those lines, and including how to love and take care of ourselves, all comes from what we see.
Mm.
We're not just, like, we're born with instincts, right? But we're not born with how to think.
Yeah.
Like, we're not born with how to naturally want to think about ourselves in a positive light. And it's all learned behavior. So growing up in an environment of chaos and of trauma and of conditions, to where love was conditional, like, so let me first offer a disclaimer. There's no doubt in my mind that my parents love me
Hmm.
at all, um, and would do anything for me. But with what happened in the first 5 years of my life, of them both under the same roof, and then what happened thereafter for the next 10, 12, 15 years of custody battles and visitations and all that kind of stuff and bashing each other. Um, it was all just like, I learned that boundaries don't exist, right? The only boundaries that existed in terms of love and of valuing oneself came at the order of the courts,
Hmm.
right? Like, you're only allowed within this distance of the home.
Wow. Yeah.
You're only allowed to contact this person through this avenue. Otherwise, other than that, like, it was fair game. So, like, let people walk all over you, right? The people that struggle the most to adhere to boundaries are the people that don't have any for themselves.
Hmm.
And I saw that play out in myself as I grew up and started to become a man. In that I never learned what it was like to have healthy boundaries.
Hmm.
I never learned what it was like to prioritize myself, and check in with myself first before I checked in with anyone else.
Yeah.
And that was such a, you learn all these different survival techniques amidst all that trauma and amidst all that uncertainty and that chaos that you go through. You're in your formative years, like, you're learning about the world,
Yeah.
and that's what you think the world is. And so what I had to come up with was, if I did more things, if I acted in a way that earned more praise, then I need to act more in that way. I am Pavlov's dog. I became conditioned.
Yep.
And it never once struck me of, like, is this even who I am? Because I just wanted that approval, because approval was so hard to be found. There was always chaos, there was always fighting, there was abuse. Like, it was hectic. And so how could you break up the monotony? How could you break up the tears? How could you gain approval and and see smiles where there weren't smiles to be found? And for me, it was that's where I developed my sense of humor.
Hmm.
I started entertaining. Like, I would act out scenes from my favorite shows. I would act out, funny jokes that I'd seen on a cartoon or on a movie or whatever. And so people laughed. My family would laugh, and so I wanted more of that laughter.
Yeah.
So I became more funny, and I learned how to get in front of people and take their minds off of all the chaos. And and that really plays into my foundational personality type of, I value myself as how I'm seen by others. And if I fear that they're not seeing the best side of me, or the side of me that makes them feel good, then I'm worthless. I have to cover up for my feeling of worthlessness somehow, in inner sadness.
Yeah. Man, thank you for sharing that piece. I think that's a huge Man, I just think it's a huge thing. And I think that as continue the show, I mean, I think childhood, the way that we're raised and the environment we're in is going to play a huge role. And just to, add to that, I mean, I can think in my life too of, for me, it was, I was going to receive love one way or another, but I received more love if I achieved things, if I accomplished things, if I got A's on
Mm-hmm.
tests, right? Which I understand, it's a positive conditioning, right? Like, yeah, keep doing the good thing, and that's what you want. Um, but it's also became was that the only way? Like, was that the only way to receive the most praise or love? It's just fascinating. I'm super curious. After you started going through personal development, and this is kind of a question that I know a lot of the answers to because we've talked about it personally, but I would love to get for other people to hear your journey as you're going through this personal development, right? You're in your 33, 34, going through this period of like, holy shit, who am I? Like, am I the person I thought I was? Maybe I'm not. Learning about yourself. But at the same time, you've gotten out of this 10-year relationship and you're back out there on the market, you're dating, right? And what is dating like when you're going through that? Like when you're in this, you're going through your own internal dating in a sense, right? Like, who am I? Like, you're kind of courting yourself in a way of like, what, okay,
Yeah.
come this way, go that way. But then you're also in with the opposite sex, which we're bringing a lot of, baggage, not in a negative connotation, just like our own shit, like our own stuff. How was dating during that period, and how has it been since then?
Oh man, it was so bad. Like it was such a disaster. It was just a series of just massive disappointment.
Mm,
And honestly, like thank God it happened because it forced me to keep looking deeper,
mm,
keep looking further inward, because I kept learning more and more about how we attract what we are.
mm,
And if I'm attracting a bunch of these jokers who are fickle, who are superficial, who are just egocentric, then that's me. Like that's my problem. And we allow other people to treat us in the ways that we give them permission to treat us. And and like the more I became aware of that with all the personal development that I was diving into, it became more and more clear that like, dude, you need to be alone.
mm,
Like you need to be alone
mm,
for a while until you really learn yourself, really understand how the decisions that you've made have impacted other people. Because there's no more painful work, but no more rewarding work than taking a look deep in the mirror at who your ego told you that you are and who you thought you were, and realizing that that's not at all who you are.
mm.
Because the ego is the greatest enemy, right? Like it does everything it can to preserve itself.
Yeah.
And when you tie yourself to your ego, like that's so destructive, because it's not only harmful to you, but it's harmful to whoever else you try to bring into that world. And you finally just I got to a point where I was like, I'm just tired of hurting others. Like, in what ways have I hurt other people who
Mm,
are close to me, who I've
mm,
tried to bring into that circle? Because there's so many people that are trying to come into my circle now that are hurting me. And I think it took that revelation of thinking that my whole focus now needs to not be on who can I date next, because that's just a symptom of I have this massive void, and who can I help project that onto to where they can fill it for me?
yeah.
Because inevitably they'll fail, and I will resent them because I failed to want to find that void and fill it myself.
Mm,
Um, and they do it to us too. Like we all do it to each other. It's not something that men alone have or women alone, like we all do it.
yeah.
Um, but coming to that realization that like I need to take as much time alone as I can, to get to a point where I become the best man that I'm supposed to be in
Yeah.
all facets of life, of health, wealth, relationship, like everything. My fitness, my mindset, what I do to try and contribute to society. Like I have to really work on trying to be in a good place in all those areas. Not perfect, but I have to be in a better place where I'm at least on a trajectory that's positive. Because I wasn't, like, I didn't want to be aware of all those things, you know, it's like
Yeah.
blissful ignorance.
Yeah. Yeah.
But here's the thing is like, I did that. And so where I'm at now, is there's somebody that is extremely special to me in a way to where I was on this journey to be alone, and they kept trying to knock at my door.
Mm.
And I kept wanting to keep them like on the front porch and let them know that like, hey, like I'm aware that you're here and I want you to come knock at the door and feel like you can, but just know I'm not opening it. And, you know, I think it just kind of got to the point where I got to know enough about this person while still trying to keep some sort of protective distance, not just of me, but of them too.
Yeah.
Like, am I at the point where I'm ready to not hurt you?
Mm. Mm.
Because that's going to hurt me too in the long run. We're going to hurt each other if I'm not in a place where I know that I can't hurt you.
Yeah.
And like it, she kept on, and we were joking about it last night. She was like, I just kept saying, hey, I'm here and whenever you're ready. And I finally was like, you know what, let's meet up, you know, let's meet up. And like the conversation and the interaction and just the environment of that whole vibe was different than anything I'd felt before.
Yeah.
And something was said that where I was like, you know, I'm not ready. And I was up front and I said, look, I'm not ready for anything. I'm not trying to date anybody. And then and she said something I will never forget. And it was, as I will, I'm always going to be here to support you no matter what happens with this. And I just want you to know that, because I think you're amazing. And that's nothing I've ever heard before.
Yeah.
And that took me back like, whoa, wow. And so here we are, like 7 months later, pretty much. And it's been the most healthy, honest, open, deep relationship I've ever known.
Hmm.
And it's, I mean, if it's up to me, it's the last one I'll ever know, you know. Like that's
No pressure. No pressure.
yeah, no pressure, no pressure. But it's man, it took all that stuff.
Yeah.
You know, it took all that pain and that work, to get to the point where I was open and willing to give that love, but also to receive it.
Mm. Mm.
Because until I felt worthy of receiving that level of love, there was no way I could really give it. Because here's the thing, like talking about the whole dating thing, like it's a whole, like honestly, it's a whole shit show unless you do the work to figure out who you are. Because then you're going to have no standards.
Yeah.
And if you had no standards, then you're just going to ruin your life more and the lives of those other people. And if you've got this healthier perception of what love is, it's not this like burning hot, like, you know, let's go from 0 to 100. It's amazing. This is what the movies are all about. And that's great. It really is. That's fun. Right. But that's not what it is.
Hmm.
Like love is this cool, calm, peaceful thing that you can sit in and feel safe and know that it's totally okay to be 100% you. And knowing and understanding that other person has permission to be 100% them,
Hmm.
and know that it's not just always like the fun, fast, intense stuff, because that fades. It's having that depth of like, this person had, I'm letting this person have enough access into the depths of who I am to where I don't feel like I have to put on any armor or costume or show for them.
Yeah.
And they will still be there.
Yeah.
Like, hitting that level of depth only comes from knowing enough of who you are and how you're even capable of loving somebody else, and what you expect from that love in return.
Hmm. Man.
I don't know if I answered your question.
Well, hey, that's all right. I think that's going to help somebody out there, which is what matters the most. And it's just awesome that you found that you've worked on yourself to get to that point where you put yourself in a position that could happen, and to be open to it. And so,
And it's a process like that.
yeah,
That's the whole thing. It's man in progress, right? Like,
absolutely.
it's a daily effort.
Yeah,
It has to be.
yeah. Yeah. It's not like a moment where you're just like, yep, figured it out, and
Done.
done, got it, right? Like done. Yeah, like just like everything else in life, it evolves. And I just want to say thank you for sharing that story, Jason, and opening up about yeah, that process and the progress that you've been on. And we'll have to do a whole nother episode, because I would love at some point to talk about, just because you've gotten to this place doesn't mean that those fears have gone away, that you and I deal with. We talk a lot about, we've talked a lot in person about, even when something's good, there's this fear that's going to go away and we're going to lose it. And all these things that we're still working through and in progress. And I don't want people to think that like, oh my God, Jason's reached the pinnacle. He doesn't have worries anymore, fears or emotions. So we'll have to do another episode on kind of diving into, to the fears, even within happiness, that still exist, that we
Yeah.
have. But I want to end with two questions. These have been two questions I've been loving to ask people,
Okay.
which is, one, what do you hope, or what do you wish for yourself for the 10 years older version of you right now? So 45-year-old Jason, what do you hope 45-year-old Jason is doing? What is he focused on in life?
Wow. I hope that 45-year-old Jason is still on this journey of making sure that he's friends with himself still, where he's still
Mm,
trying to do everything possible to take care of himself
I
in
love that answer.
in all the ways that flow out from that,
Yeah.
in terms of my business, my family, that I'm doing everything possible to be the best I can for them and for the people that I serve, and most importantly for myself, because I can't do any of that unless it's all genuinely out of self-care and self-love.
Yeah. I love that. I love that answer. Okay. Last question. I've been asking people, it's kind of a two-parter. First, what were you told? What did you grow up believing was what made a good man?
Hmm. Uh, you know, a good man was somebody that had a wife and kids and a stable job and um, had it all figured out.
Hmm. Hmm.
And man,
Now,
how backwards is that?
no. Okay. So second part of this question is, you're at a elementary school or middle school, and we'll say some kid who's like 10 years old raises his hand, and Jason, you're up there, just there for whatever reason to speak, and the kid stands up and asks you, especially a young man, and says, Mr. Wright, what makes a man?
Hmm. A man is somebody who is comfortable enough with feeling bad feelings and being willing to want to stand firm in the sand and not let the waves crash over him and knock him, take him away.
Hmm. Mm, man, I love that. That's a great answer. I think that's an awesome answer. I think it's, thank you for sharing that. Dude, I've had a blast. I've had a blast. My goal is to actually take all of those of what makes a man of the quotes and at some point make a book to make for kids of what makes a man. So I can't wait to get that out there for people at some point. And dude, I just want to say, man, you know, you're one of my closest friends, and I'm a huge fan of you and what you're doing. And I want to say thank you for taking time to be on the show.
I appreciate you, not just having me on, but for even doing this. Like that takes a level of self-awareness and bravery that there's not a lot of us that are willing to do that. So thank you.
Dude, oh man, well thank you, right? It's for me, it's I get the easiest job in the world, man. I just get to ask people questions and
Right?
learn. It's my favorite thing. But I really appreciate it, working on getting better at accepting compliments and praise. So I appreciate that. And Jason, if people are out there listening that are like, whoa, I really resonate with this guy. I really love what Jason was saying. I want to follow him on his journey. Uh, you know, you've got a ton going on. One, you also do online fitness and training for people, especially during this crazy time of where we're in right now. If you forgot and didn't catch the beginning, we're recording this during really, I would say peak, but who knows? I mean,
Yeah.
we're still fairly in the beginning of this coronavirus. But Jason, if people want to keep up with you, follow you, reach out to you, what's the best ways for them to do that?
Honestly, shoot me an email. It's
Go in the email route.
Yeah, send me
All
an
right.
email.
Cool.
Because you can follow me on Instagram at WrightFit Physio. All this stuff will be in the show notes on the spelling because people don't know how to spell my name or physio. Follow me on Facebook, like add me on Facebook, Jason Wright. But yeah, email Jason at WrightFitPT.com.
Cool. And that's WrightFit is WrightFit physio.com. So
it's last name Wright, WrightFit PT.com.
PT.com. All right.
Yeah.
It'll be in the show notes. Just pretend I didn't say anything. Listen to Jason. We'll you know, just Google Jason Wright physiotherapy. He'll pop up.
Yeah.
So guys, if you like that, you got to go follow Jason. He's also got some of the funniest memes out there, some of the funniest stuff that he posts on Instagram. He's also doing workouts, and just an incredible guy to follow. So thank you guys so much for tuning into this episode. Follow us on Instagram at Man in Progress Podcast, and we'll catch you guys on the next episode.